So I'm going to introduce the next theme for you. We're going to talk about, as I say, EV charging. And we've got this Mentimeter question for you as well. So if you want to fill in this Mentimeter question, it's just an agree or not. And the question is, the charging experience matters more than the charging speed. If you would like to take some time to fill that in, then I'm going to invite Marcus RÖNNGREN LIU on stage with me, so that we can sort of evaluate this together.
Great.
Give a big hand of applause for Marcus. Marcus is They don't applaud. Come on, guys.
Thank you, thank you.
He's an excellent presenter, and he's the Senior Project Manager of the Sweden-US Green Transition Initiative. So I think I'll leave the discussion here with you. I mean, it is a sort of 50-50.
It is.
Yeah.
I mean, the charging experience matters more than the charging speed, yeah?
Yeah, okay. Leave it to you. Good luck with your panel.
Great. Thank you so much. I mean, you've been helping the next panel with some of their business development. Our next session is focusing on what's next for EV charging. And we will explore how the charging ecosystem is evolving to support widespread EV adoption. And it's, of course, wide. It's across hardware, platforms, software, regulation, and global standards. To kick us off, we have Andreas LASTEI, who's Vice President of Sales and Marketing at AUTEL Energy Europe. He will give us a keynote where he goes in and explores a global outlook on charging infrastructure, as well as user pain points and some solutions that will help shape tomorrow. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome up on stage, Andreas.
Thank you, Marcus. I just need a clicker.
It's over here.
Oh, thank you.
All right.
Thank you. All right. Okay, though, thank you, and it's great to be here in Gothenburg amongst e-mobility enthusiasts and industry experts. So, what's next for EV charging? That question can be answered from different angles, but what we can say happily now is that e-mobility has finally arrived. And the next is a challenging question because for infrastructure, it is a matter of how fast and where can we deploy to make it work for everybody, right? And I would also say the phase of the early adoption is over, and we have to convince now the masses. So let's have a look at some numbers. Because in recent years, e-mobility has really become part of our everyday life. One number that is around now is that every 5th car sold is now an EV. In the EU alone, we have 11 million EVs circulating right now, and we are approaching the 1 million mark in public charging points. In the US, 4.5 million, and also a rollout happening fast. China is leading in scale. We won't benchmark it too much. It's a closed ecosystem. We will focus on other markets. But we can say globally that the EV adoption rate is a little ahead of the charging points needed. On average, it depends very much on the country. Sometimes, in best case, in public charging, we keep the same pace. Now, we are going to talk about public charging, don't get me wrong. Private charging is very important. Up to 90% of charging sessions happen at home or at work. But public charging, we figured, is what really also builds confidence for the new e-mobility drivers. And this is why we will focus on this today more. It has improved a lot, the public charging, the last couple of years, but there are some key pain points still. Accessibility, many apps, different user flows. We have different cards, logins, user experiences. There is pricing, not always transparent, not always clear, sometimes not affordable. We have reliability, probably the key point. Even if the charger is online, sometimes I cannot charge. And actually, this has become one of the main concerns. Important KPI from our customers and CPOs is now the customer charging success rate. And if you measure that next to the famous uptime, it really translates for the EV driver in, can I plug in? Does it work from beginning to end without disruptions? This is especially important if you think about the people now, maybe a skeptical part of the population who are switching and need to be convinced. Sometimes we have one shot. If that is gone, then it takes a long time to convince them. At AUTEL, we are a charger manufacturer. We keep that in mind. We provide a whole portfolio from home charging to public charging solutions, 7 kilowatt to upper megawatt charging. And today our customers demand, I would say, or want that we think about beyond the charging per se, so beyond the charger. It's about the services you can provide. It's about, can you have a smart solution for load balancing? Can you offer an integration or even an interface with battery management, with photovoltaic, for peak energy management? Is your charging solution compliant with AFIR regulations or other regulations? And so on and so forth. Is it scalable? Very important. And is it affordable? And also, is it not only CapEx, but also OpEx plays a major role. So serviceability and maintenance, very important factors. So we position ourselves and offer the charging in between the wider mobility and energy landscape. One of the mega trends that needs to be mentioned is the electrification of transportation. And here we expect to have around 400,000 electrified trucks on the streets in Europe alone by 2030. It's not sufficient to have a car charging situation or a car charging hub. It's important that we develop what we call the megawatt charging system, that we keep developing it and is investing in it. There is a new standard. We at AUTEL believe a lot in it and are pushing for it. It's called the MCS. And with this, we did several successful tests already. But it's not just about managing all that power that is needed. It's also about, is the grid available? Planning, especially site planning and site layout. And above all, probably here, reliability again, because for the fleet operators, it's really about their business case. Any kind of downtime means loss of revenue, translates into loss of money. So it's a complete no-go, and it's even more sensitive than for the passenger cars. Oh, by the way, I wanted to show you, on the right-hand side, these are some installation with it in the Nordics. They are hybrid, so both serving passenger and truck at the same time. Yeah, this is either truck, passenger, or anything else of application. We need to keep in mind who we're serving as a user. And here, it's not just about us as charger manufacturer. It's about our customers, the CPO or the solution providers. It's about truck or car OEMs. It's about the roaming providers or the EMSPs like Blub Serving. It's about standardization bodies like CHARIN or institutions like the IEA who are helping us accumulate the data, pushing policies in the right direction. And in the end of the day, the user doesn't really care who in the chain failed. If something is not working, for them, it's simply that they lost trust, right? And here I come also to a conclusion to again answer the question, what's next for EV charging? Well, it's not just about putting more chargers to the ground and faster ones, but it's especially about trust and building confidence and continue to do so. It's about delivering quality and collaborating across industry. And it's about trust that I find the right charger for the right situation. The charger is available and it works all the time. It's about a seamless user experience without disruptions. And even if we keep this in mind from a charger manufacturer perspective at AUTEL, of course, everyone is affected by that in the industry. So no one can do it on their own and alone. And we need common responsibility in order to achieve that. And in this way, we can also, we believe, guarantee a transition to the mass adoption phase, the next logical step, and that is what probably is next for EV charging. Looking forward to the panel discussion, and thank you very much for your attention.
Great. Thank you, Andreas. All right, so we will be diving into our discussion, and to our help, I would like to invite a couple of more speakers up on stage. Could I please be joined by Elizabeth Connolly, who is Energy Technology and Transport Analyst at the International Energy Agency, Sophia Dijkhaat, who's Chief Operating Officer at PlugSurf, and then Michael Keller, who's Chief Technology Officer at Chargin. Give them a warm applause. All right, welcome. So happy to have you here. Before we start, I would like to give each and one of you the opportunity for just 30 seconds to a minute, tell us and the audience a little bit about what you do. Michael, I'll start.
Yeah, I'm Michael Keller. I'm from CHAN, from the CHAN Association. And I'm, as a CTO, also discussing with all the different groups and also the team of CHAN with the industry players how to align, how to bring standards forward, and also how to support the industry with a level playing field where they can then do their products and their businesses.
Thank you. Andreas, we heard from you.
Yeah, I already made a comment probably. AUTEL Europe charging manufacturer, and I am responsible for the business in Europe, sales and marketing VP. So I help with strategic customers, I help with the strategy, I help with building the organization, serving the customers. Yeah.
Thank you.
Great, yes. I'm Elizabeth Connolly, so I'm working at the International Energy Agency, working on kind of the long-term projections for EVs. And for the past 3 years, I've been leading our annual Global EV Outlook report series. And so that's a report that is kind of a deliverable to the Electric Vehicles Initiative that was founded in, I think, 2010 under the Clean Energy Ministerial. So these governments, member governments, kind of came together wanting to, promote electric mobility. And so at the IEA, what we do with the Global EV Outlook report each year is try to, track progress and identify challenges and share best practices with respect to everything EVs. So excited to be here today and kind of provide some of this global perspective on charging infrastructure.
Thank you. Sophia.
And hi everyone, my name is Sophia Dijkhaat and I'm the CEO of a company called PlugSurfing. So my employer is a company named CoPay, and I suppose not many of you will have heard of CoPay since we tend to work through various go-to-market brands. But essentially CoPay is a fairly large US headquartered corporate payment company that aims to simplify payments. And we work through brands like All-Star and Travelcard and Pay by Phone, which you may know. But also PlugSurfing. So PlugSurfing is the business that I'm more specifically representing here today. And PlugSurfing is the e-mobility arm of CoPay, meaning that we want to be powering the future of EV charging for businesses and drivers as well, through offering access to a network of now nearly 1 million charging points, but also we add a service layer to that, so we really want to enhance the network we give access to, so basically to put a quality stamp on that, if you will.
All right, thank you very much. Well, so let's start a little bit about user experience and infrastructure readiness. We heard and we saw on the audience Mentimeter that speed not so important compared to the overall experience. And we also saw that in your pain points. Speed wasn't one of those that at least didn't make your list. But with that said, well, so how well is today's EV charging infrastructure when it comes to meeting user needs in terms of availability, speed, and reliability?
Try to start again.
Andreas or Sophia?
Yeah, exactly.
Sophia?
Go ahead. I talked enough.
Okay. I mean, from my perspective, coming from someone who's been in the industry for nearly a decade now, if not over already, I think we've really, really come a long way. And I'm not just saying it because we're here on stage, but we really have. So I was just talking to a colleague the other day who remembered that back in 2018, we had approximately 70,000 charging points on Plugsurfing. And as I said a moment ago today, it's close to 1 million charging points, sort of 7 years fast forward. So I think we've really done a lot of progress in terms of being able to bring more charging points to the drivers. And obviously there's more power available through the chargers as well. So more in terms of quantity and more in terms of power, which equals then faster charging. So I think that's great. And all of us and here, you there who have been sort of contributing to that, I think we need to, be happy about that and be proud of that. However, we also need to acknowledge that there's still a long way to go to be able to say that we have met the needs of the drivers. And if I sort of open up a bit what I mean by that, I think it also depends on, we talk about accessibility and reliability, and it depends on the sort of definition of that. So you have a strict sort of technical definition of, let's say, charger uptime, or you have statistics about how many charge points we have in different countries and regions and so on. But I like to think about this sort of more broadly, really from an individual's driver's perspective, because I think, Andreas, you also touched on this, as a driver, it's not necessarily sufficient to know that, the charger's uptime is close to 100% if you are, for whatever other reason, not able to charge, or when you need a charger and the charger is not there, but you're told that, well, on average, there should be a charger, but if it's not there, it's not there, so it's not going to help me as a driver. So I like to think about it sort of a bit more broadly, and for me what accessibility and reliability means is that yes, there needs to be a charger when and where I need it. So I think there we need to accept that access is still uneven today, and certain areas are better served than others. The driver needs to be able to access the charger physically. Yes, I think we also have some stories about drivers not being able to actually physically get to the charger, but I'm also referring to the interface. So whatever interface you have in between the charger and the driver, you need to be able to access that. The charger needs to work. And the whole experience I'm referring to. So it's not only about the charger working technically, but the app needs to work if that is what you're using to start your charge, or the RFID and the payment processing needs to work. And for me, at least, reliability also refers to pricing. So the driver being able to see the price and also understand the price, because we see some pretty wild pricing schemes out there. So I feel that's also part of that reliability. And I would also go as far as to say that it's not only about seeing and understanding the pricing, but it's also about the pricing being fair. And I think speed is part of that reliability as well. So as a driver, I want for that charge to happen within a reasonable amount of time in relation to much time I would plan to spend at that location. So there it's about having the right chargers at the right places. And it's about having customer support. So when things do go wrong, you need to have good customer support available. So it's really all of that. And we need to do all of this and still leave the customer with the feeling that they've had a great charging experience.
Yeah.
Well,
thank you. I mean, Andreas, do you agree with what you just heard?
Yeah, large part I do. There's just one thing that I, maybe I said it in the presentation from. It's really fragmented, especially in Europe. You cannot just say there are enough plus or there are not, because every country is very much. If I look, I'm from Italy. I speak German. I spent some time in Germany. Two completely different worlds. The EV adoption rates completely different. The ratio of chargers available towards EV adoption rate also completely different. And yeah, this is hard to say there is a good or bad, right? But I think what we don't understand right now, do we have enough right installation and right power at the right places, right? So this is the thing. Do we keep always pace with the EV adoption rate? Because if not, then we feel again this perception that there is not enough plug. I cannot switch to the EV, right? So this is an issue.
Michael,
accessibility, yeah, I agree 100%. I had it on the slides.
Yeah.
And the pricing, I feel you have more pain, and the user has a lot of pain, right? For manufacturer, it's a little bit transparent. It's not our main topic, yeah.
Yeah. And Michael, you have many members, and within all different means of transportation. But so when you discuss this issue with your members, do they have the same perception?
Yeah, we are focusing on two aspects with our members. So the question before the session here, I would not be able to choose one or the other. For me, it's both. Yeah. And there are two key aspects. One is, that's also connected to what you just mentioned, the inability must be really ensured. Yeah. And we know that we still have something to go with a lot of these products in the market, and it's improving more and more. But we also see new players coming in, and that's why we from Chan also organizing test events, where you can then bring your charger, test it with 10, 20 different cars, or the other way around, you bring your car, you test it with different chargers, to have then the availability of the charger itself, plus also the amount of charge events you have in the 89, 99% first attempt, also successful charging. And that's still something we need to do. Even if the standards are published and a lot of implementation guides and other things are being known, but it's always something what needs to be proven. Yeah? And the other aspect is more power, so the performance or the user experience also regarding that. We have seen in the beginning, though the high power charger was the edge, yeah. So that's and that 350 kilowatt, yeah, wow, Porsche is doing it, and it's really the best what you can do. But in the meantime, this is, I would not say average, but it's something which not impresses anybody anymore, and so even the charging power goes higher, yeah. So although there is a development, we need to also support and bring forward, and now we have seen. Several weeks ago in Munich on the Power to Drive, the 1000 amp with a CCS charger and the connector able to do that. So I don't know, 5 years ago, nobody would have assumed that could be possible, but the development is going, there's more and more experience made, and so this also needs to be supported, because that's then really driving also regarding the power, although the user experience regarding how fast you can charge. Yeah? So the charge attempts should be ideally 100% working, latest on the second attempt, I would say, but let's say 99% first time is a good target. But on the other hand, also to make it more in the way of how you fuel your car in the past, you can also charge. Yeah? So that's a much more likely feeling that people can get used to quicker, because if we are growing in the market, you have to address also users which are very gasoline addicted, or combustion engine addicted, or the sound addicted maybe. But performance of electric car is then the next thing what they can like, but then also they like to have a similar habitance of charging. And that's something what we can now also achieve with the next level of high power.
Thank you. We received some questions from the audience, and they all have one common thread through them. And they're talking about the difference and the hardship when it comes to that some applications are geo-locked, for instance, between different countries or different regions, and also that it's not one public charger that, or you can't access all public chargers, you need different applications. and so on. And I guess this also goes back to maybe the policy and regulation framework. We have 27 countries in the European Union, compared to the US, for instance, is one country, even though it's 50 states, and China, more or less, is one unity. What would you say, like in the policy and regulation, do this? Is this something we can do to open it up?
I mean, opening it up is one thing, and then sort of the way access is given can also be another thing. So I think we'll talk a bit about policy as well in a moment, and I'm happy to share a bit of sort of plug surfing thoughts in relation to that. But I think in terms of, so if the question is, we have multiple countries and multiple networks, therefore multiple apps, it's already possible today to have access to, for instance, again, through plug surfing, we have nearly 1 million charging points, and we operate in about 25 countries in Europe. So you can sort of roam around Europe using the plug surfing app. But what I would say as well, sort of in relation to reliability and accessibility, is that I suppose it's not sufficient to have, let's say, from a user's perspective, I mean, it's not sufficient to have thousands of apps, for instance, and perhaps we need to streamline and unify that. And it's not only the inconvenience on having to download multiple apps or sort of ordering multiple RFID keys, but it's also that each sort of user flow might look different depending on the service provider, and then it's quite inconvenient for the user to try to figure out how to make this work. So I do think that we need some level of sort of unified way of gaining access to the networks and the chargers, but I'm not sure whether that is something we would need regulation on, at least not at the moment.
Yeah, I'm also not sure about regulation on that, because the regulation of the AFIR shows you have to have also some kind of a credit card or other electronic payment being possible, which is opening up the ability to also have more chargers being accessible, not only with one app or a card. But to be honest, I don't like any cards or any apps, because the ideal world should be that really the car knows where to go. Yeah, which charger is on the route, the right charger to stop, and the car knows which charger are connected, and then you have the plug and charge function, and you just plug in. That's how it should look like. Yeah? Then you are even more convenient than fueling. But this is right now a thing where we also have different suppliers of the PKI, so the certificate ecosystems. But also this morning we have heard that the three big ones here in Europe with Hubcheck, Irdeto, and Shref are also partnering. They want also to get their systems more connected, to make it easier to choose and to have them also interoperability or multi-PKI capability, what we also test on our char and test levels. But then it's opening up, yeah, and then you have really more chances to do. But still, we have a lot of chargers which are not capable of doing such intelligent charging, and that's still something what we have really to explain always. Okay, we need a more sophisticated, better user experience, and also the charger must be able to do so. So I would like to see some point in time that all chargers are really plug and charge capable. Yeah? And so this is one part with the plug and charge. But plug and charge, how is it right now defined, is clear with the MSPs and also with roaming. But on the other hand, we have also started some discussions about alternative payment solutions. Why not also have the chance to choose if you want to have your contract as a payment on this charger, or you can also use a digital credit card in some form. Yeah? There's no definition existing right now. That's also something what we are start working on in Charn with our members. But this could open up even more chances where you can then charge and combine the technology of easy plug and charge function and the ability to have different kinds of payment and contract capabilities. And I think that would be then the ultimate goal we should achieve.
Yeah. I mean, looking at these questions, there's a lot of challenges with what you're trying to say, and then most of the questions are instead pointing at the different challenges. I was thinking about, Elizabeth, the International Energy Agency. You have a global perspective, and when looking into the plug and charge, for instance, the possibility, which nations or regions would you say maybe would be as a maybe in the forefront or as a best practice?
Well, I mean, I think different countries take different approaches to this, right? And so I think there's obviously players that are against the regulation side that you're talking about. But I think what we see, you know, in the US, for example, is that incentives or subsidies for building out charging infrastructure can be tied to requirements such as having a common payment system and this kind of thing. And kind of the user access and reliability metrics are tied into receiving federal funding for building out charging infrastructure. So I think that's one way to promote it without necessarily requiring every charger have these capabilities. So I think that's a way that can, it work if you have money to help fund that. But if you are, you know, not able to fund the charger build out anyway, then I think it has to come through regulation if the market's not doing it itself.
Yeah. And Sophia, you have, I mean, members or partners throughout the entire, I mean, many countries throughout Europe. Do you see any country that is maybe sticking out from the hurdle in any way, both up or down?
So in terms of EV development, well, I mean, I don't know if you've had a look at the latest State of the Industry report that's been published by Charge Europe a couple of weeks ago. So there, actually, some countries are mentioned in terms of where there's been sort of the highest growth in the last couple of years. So I think Belgium is mentioned and Luxembourg is mentioned, and then I think Lithuania was also one country. So I think those are the ones where we've seen sort of some growth lately. And you know, looking at the report, there seems to be a correlation between incentives and you know, subsidies and whatnot. You know, sort of and that growth. So I would sort of refer to those results.
But do that in line with your own internal reports and analysis?
I mean, with Plugsurfing, so we've been here since 2012, so we have a sort of long-standing user base as well. So Germany is an important country for us. The Netherlands is an important country for us, especially following. So for those of you who haven't been following up on sort of Plugsurfing's journey, so we were acquired a couple of years ago by a company called Corpay, and through that we got sort of a sister company called Travelcard, who's actually very big in fleets, and especially in the Netherlands, for instance. And through that, we've actually seen a lot of growth there. The UK is a big market for us. So yeah. So I wouldn't, so from Plugsurfing's perspective, I wouldn't necessarily name exactly these same countries than where we actually see that growth.
Yeah. All right.
So maybe I would like to mention one state,
Yeah.
specifically, not regarding the subsidies and funding of infrastructure, but on the other hand, more on the quality. Because in California, there's from the CARB also given a regulation, EVs have to comply with the conformance test criteria. And that is something what we have developed in Charin, and we also developing, or we have developed a conformance test where you can make a certification of approval that your charger or your car is really conformance certified and approved. And that would help also to bring this quality up. This is also something what can be regulated also outside of California. And I think that's also something we should think about, not only saying, okay, we want to have this technology implemented, but also to really check and guarantee that the implementation is done properly, because you see more and more also new suppliers coming to the field. It's good to have them, because we need the volume to bring enough charger onto the roads, but we also to have ensure a certain quality level, and that would be one good chance to do, if that would be also some kind of regulation included,
Yeah. I mean, when talking about California, there's a story I heard about the EV charging points that some of them were funded by government funding or state funding, but there was a criteria that you had to be able to pay with card. And so some of them lost the signal, and so you could no longer pay with card, and so they turned them off, even though you could you could still use an app or something else. But no, sorry, the card reader broke, and that's why they turned them off, even though you could still use an app to charge it. So yeah, there's some of the policy. But of course, we've also been hearing about faster charging is essential for scaling EV adoption. So what must happen to accelerate the deployment of faster chargers? I mean, this is probably a collaboration between many stakeholders. So what type of challenges do you see with that type of collaboration?
I think the mega trend here that I mentioned earlier is megawatt charging and truck charging, electrification of transportation in general, even maritime maybe, thinking about something else. I cannot imagine that 400, 500 kV or anything close, you're getting nowhere, right? At certain size. So you need a lot of power all the time. And in order to prepare the whole network for that, we hear it from everywhere, the grid needs to be prepared for that, right? And so this is probably something beyond the reach, but for our customers or for our growth or for e-mobility to succeed in the next step, it is essential to have the grid ready to handle those power levels. So I think that is one point, at least, that comes to mind for now. Yeah.
And I could add from my side that you know, obviously money talks often, and we've talked about incentives and policy measures and whatnot. But I think something that's good for us to acknowledge is that I feel we can't sort of consider the charging infrastructure in a silo because we're working with a bit of a two-sided platform here. So on the other side, you have the cars and people, at least for the time being, still driving the cars. And on the other side, you have chargers. So we need to think about ways to sort of speed up as well, or making sure that this side sort of keeps on top of the development. But we equally need to think about how do we incentivize and remove obstacles from this other side so that we get more EVs on the road. Because through that, then sort of demand happens. And when there's demand, then you will have the players come in who want to deploy chargers and who want to make sure that the you know, payment terminals keep on working, as you know, per your example, because they will see the financial gain coming through that demand, and then they will have more incentives to make sure that the chargers also keep on working. So just my point being that I don't think we can just look at sort of charging infrastructure and how to sort of speed up that development, because if we incentivize only that side without having that demand, then I'm not sure how sort of sustainable it can be to incentivize only the other side.
Yeah, I think that's something we definitely recommend to our, you know, government stakeholders, is that, you know, your plans for EV deployment need to be matched with a plan for EV charging deployment. And I think, I mean, I would say I think the European Union's done a decent job of this, where they've kind of, you know, through their CO2 standards, there's some, you know, clear pathway to growing EV adoption. And I think the Alternative Fuels Infrastructure Regulation has done a good job of trying to make sure that charging deployment will match in step. And what we've seen in recent years in the EU is that so far we have kind of seen a steady level of charging points, public charging points per EVs on the road. So we're optimistic that they'll be able to keep that. But yeah, I think, you know, policymakers in general have a big role to play in kind of bringing all of these stakeholders together and making sure that, yeah, transport planners are talking to grid operators and making sure that all of the actors are, you know, really planning ahead, since it can take, yeah, in some cases years to get, you know, new grid upgrades, the lines, all of this built out to support, especially high power charging, especially if it's in kind of rural areas where the grid might not normally, be equipped for that kind of thing.
But is the responsibility on policymakers or manufacturers to, for instance, one issue that's been raised with EVs is, of course, the price compared to a combustion engine. So should it be on the manufacturers to press down the price or lower the price, or should it be subsidies through policy?
This is for the EVs or for the charging?
Well, for EVs, to create the demand for EVs, for charging.
Right. Well, I mean, I think what CO2 and fuel economy standards do is they make the manufacturers sell them, and that could come at a hit to profits for automakers if they're not able to efficiently produce EVs that are attractive to consumers. But I mean, what I've seen, obviously, there's been a lot of talk this year in the EU and in terms of offering flexibilities. But I think automakers, if there's a plan laid out in terms of kind of what level of EV penetration you'll need in your sales over the next 10 years, I think you can plan your models accordingly. And I think a lot of automakers have focused on big SUV, kind of the money-making segment for them for their electric vehicles. And what they're seeing is that now it's time to move to the mass market, these smaller, more affordable EVs to help increase penetration.
Because I mean, just looking at China, China has like 500 something EV manufacturers, and then of course they had some type of Darwinism within that, even though they were subsidized initially. They all now found a structure, a viable method, and then that created supply chain around that. I mean, if you're looking at like now in the US, there is an affordable electric pickup coming to the market, just to be able to compete and be a lower, cheaper alternative than the combustion engine, even though it's on par.
Yeah, I mean, what's incredible is last year in China, 2/3 of battery electric cars were cheaper than the conventional size equivalent. So, I mean, what's happened there is really amazing. I think policy early on had a lot to do with fostering that ecosystem and building out the supply chain, as you're speaking about. So, we're hoping to see progress follow in the US and the EU, but I think a lot of that also has to come down to building up this battery manufacturing and expertise, not just the manufacturing, but really efficiently manufacturing batteries.
Great. Anyone else that wanted to join in that discussion?
Yeah, maybe in my past I was also responsible for battery development at an OEM. So the key factor to bring the cost down is really to reduce the cost of the battery cells. And that's a bit of an issue in Europe because we don't have the raw materials. We don't have the value chain where you have also the raw earth materials, what you need in some parts of the electric cars, and we don't have the capacity to produce here. And also, if you do battery production, it's a lot of energy you need. Yeah, and so we don't have the full resources here. We don't have the cheap energy here. So that makes it really difficult. And that's also why China is so strong, because they have very good access. And in some parts, majority of 80% of the global capability of having these raw materials. And on the other hand, they have developed a lot of capacities in China, which then brings also down the cost. And that's something where it's really a critical situation. Do we really want to achieve that? So that needs a big step forward. But also the question, it's more how do we get the materials here in Europe to also be able to have the same chance of same price point for electric vehicles in the European market?
Yeah, certainly I think partnerships between countries that might have access to these critical minerals, as well as, investment. And what we saw was that, Chinese firms and the government were investing in mines themselves. So that, is always an expensive option to pursue. But I think also just, trying to build these partnerships along the supply chain in a kind of geographically diverse way is something that, countries are more and more looking to do.
And from my side, I would say the short answer to your question is that it's a team sport. Like e-mobility, like many others, is a team sport. And I've heard many people say the same in the different sessions. So it's not going to be one party solving everything. So we need to come together and figure this out together, and which is why we're here today as well.
Great, thank you. To wrap things up, and also to put light, to wrap things up, I would like to offer you all a lightning round of giving the audience maybe a small peek into the future. So what is the one key milestone, technology, regulation, market-based, for the EV charging industry that must be reached maybe to 2025 or 2030? 2030.
I think it's not one, but more.
Yeah.
but when it comes to charging experience, I would say insist again on the charging session success rate, bringing it up to 99% probably, even if that hurts us as manufacturer today to hear that, but we are working on it. And there are a lot of variables who can influence that outcome. That a charging session starts smoothly, that plug-in charge is implemented on every single charger that is out there, that we continue to collaborate. I mean, we hosted the MCS controller testable earlier this year at AUTEL in Barcelona. I think those cross-industry, or let's say cross-actor and responsibility actions are very important. And also maybe for policymakers to push quality in the, let me say, in the incentive that they're putting there, because today it was more about capex, right? It is about base investment. So you put chargers there, you get money. But what if you put chargers there that work at this and this and this criteria to guarantee the quality, and I make sure that you do, and then we measure the outcome, right? So that is also something I think then we can reach some milestones. Just a couple of ideas.
Thank you.
Yeah, I guess I would say I agree with the multiple milestones. I mean, every country is also going to have its own kind of milestones, right? And so it depends a lot kind of on, yeah, what's happening in the country. In our own modeling at the IEA, we try, well, we, as I mentioned at the beginning, do long-term projections of EV adoption and deployment. And so what we do with that also is try to estimate the charging infrastructure requirements by region. So the EU as a whole, not for each country, but I think this kind of method can be, replicated, where starting with kind of how many EVs you expect to have on the road, you can try to estimate, at least what level of public charging, both numbers and capacity, will be needed. And I think, one of the things we see for Europe is that, to get to what would be commensurate with the 2030 CO2 target, so this is like in line with government policies, you would need to build out about 200,000 charging points every year until 2030. And what's really, I think, exciting about that is that last year we built out, or Europe built out more than 200,000. So it seems fairly achievable for this. Obviously, it really depends, where these are going to make sure that there's coverage across all of Europe. But I think it, gives the sense that this is very achievable to hit some of these milestones. Another kind of metric that we looked at this year was also in terms of the coverage along highways to enable long-distance travel, this kind of thing. And I mean, the alternative fuels infrastructure regulation already, of course, gets at that. We are trying to compare against countries, but so we took kind of, what's the coverage is there a charger within every 50 kilometers? And what we found in Europe, again, is that 80% of highways are already covered with a charger at a charging station, so at least 4 charging points, high speed, along highways. We're seeing less of that in the US. I think it's around 40%, but in some regions like the Pacific coast, we see that back up at around 70%. So I think there's several metrics that countries and states and cities can use to help realize what milestones they need to set in the future.
I think you asked for one, but I'm going to try and sneak in a couple if I speak really fast. No, so I mean, from a plug surfing perspective, I would actually like to use some of the words I saw on your slide. I think it said interoperability needs to be real. And I fully support that and couldn't agree more. And I would say that roaming needs to be real. And what I mean by that is that it's not only the technical connection, but also the commercials related to roaming need to be on a level where drivers roaming can actually get a reasonable price, because unfortunately we still see partner CPOs who are happy to roam and to have that technical connection, but then the expected commercials on that are on a level where it would end up having, like, the drivers would end up having to pay way more when they would be roaming versus using the CPO service directly. So roaming also needs to be real, both on a technical and on a commercial level. And of course, we have a FEAR supporting us in that, and that's great. great, but there's still some way to go in implementing it. So that's the first one I would say. But then the second one, in terms of the driver experience, so thinking, sort of reflecting on the question of do we meet drivers' needs today? I was thinking about, well, when can we know that those needs have been met? And I ended up thinking that perhaps when the drivers will have become indifferent in relation to charging, then we can say that we will have met their needs, because who wants to spend their time thinking about charging their car outside of people in this room and in the industry? So I think the normal driver does not want to spend hours thinking about all of these things that we've discussed. It's just something that needs to happen. It's a means to an end, and it needs to get done. It needs to be boring. They need to feel indifferent, and I think that when everyone will feel indifferent in relation to charging, then we can say that we will have met the driver's needs.
Great, thank you so much. I mean, we heard today that for the future of EVs, it's a team sport. We need to collaborate throughout different various sectors. So I just want to say big thank you to our panel and thank you to our audience, and enjoy the rest of your day.